Hey everyone, Dan here. We are doing the trading day on Wednesday, July 14th. Today we're going to take a look at Academy Sports and Outdoors, ASO. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also, if you would like to receive a once or twice per week email newsletter from me starting in August with additional trade ideas, setups, opportunities that I see, interesting factoids that I find in the marketplace, drop your email in the Google form, which is linked in the description below, and I will send you a note before the newsletter launches in August, giving you more details and then giving you an opportunity to opt out if it's no longer interesting to you. All right, so ASO has been on a tear since it IPO'd. We can see here this is the entirety of the charts. You see there's nothing left of this. So October 2nd, 2020. This has been trading for less than a year, but it has been on an absolute tear from 1205. Peaked out at 42.75 for the time being, and is now pulling back a little bit. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to do some trend analysis, some charting of different areas that could be of interest and potential bounce zones and retracement areas that we could look for. And then we'll go ahead and look at some of the data that could be sort of contributing to some factors with this most recent pullback and how that could sort of like impact the severity of the pullback, or the non-severity of the pullback. So the first things that jump out to me obviously are, it was first wrapped up in this like very nice uptrend from, when it came on the market in October, beginning of October, through about the end of March 2021, which again, if you remember, there was quite a bit of selling off that was going on, especially with like relatively fresh stocks, like fresh to the public market stocks that sort of kicked off in February and March and bled into April and May. But there was a pretty solid pullback there. This obviously wasn't wrapped up in that, which is additionally interesting to me. But then what we actually saw was basically ASO saying, hey, I have a steeper uptrend that I can maintain. So let me break from this uptrend and do sort of something different from what we often see when something breaks from an uptrend, which is sort of retrace a bit and kind of establish a trading floor price, a trading price floor. No, it said, hey, I'm going to break this trend because I can actually kick this price up faster. So pretty incredible movement there, which is really impressive. And now obviously we're seeing a bit of a retracement coming down here as of late, and I'll put this in red since it's moving down, and sort of looking to see, where a good buy zone might be here. Now, a couple of things that I would note on the recent retracements. You see this one here also came down pretty steep, but then was able to buck the downtrend and make a new high, about not quite $1 above the previous high. But the thing that sort of stands out to me from these more recent retracements is if you look at this retracement, I mean, if we want to call those retracements, I mean, to some extent they're moving slightly down toward, where they had pumped up from. But they're kind of like relatively consolidatory in nature. But these look to me more like sort of standard retracement, so it's really pulling back into the price zone at which it started to make the move up. And these are much more fully retraced, if you will, from where they had started to bump up. So we see, a move up here and then a stutter step and then a big push up. So if we take from that stutter step to the top where it topped out there, and then just before it pulled back, we see that it came back down. Ooh, this is really impossible to see. Let me just move this over. 41.96. Okay. So we see that it came down here to about the 786 level, which obviously prior to that, nothing was doing anything close to that. And then if we take a look at Similarly, this one here, and see where we're going. If we see from the push off here up to that 42.75, I'll take this over here again, 42.75, we see it's pulling back again quite significantly down to the 786 right now. So at the same level at which it's made another run up last time, it's sort of sitting there at the moment, and the question is, okay, is it going to push off here, or is it going to retrace further? Additionally, it does line up really nicely with, let me see how I want to plot this. It does line up really nicely with this previous supply and demand zone that you see here, where there was this shift here from topping out, so resistance to support, and then also here there was this resistance level that was hit, and even previously back here, pretty tight into that zone before it pushed off up here. So there's something to consider there. The other thing that I'd be a little bit sort of wary about would be that this higher high wasn't the higher high that we had seen prior to this. So again, similarly to how we didn't see it retrace as strongly, we saw it then kick up stronger. Like the next pump was significantly higher than this, again, sort of like less than $1 price increase from about 41.90 to 42.75. So could be losing a little bit of steam. We do also see sort of some of the volume decreasing here a bit. We haven't seen the huge buy volume coming in like we saw in these areas and even here. But then we also do see a diminishment of the sell volume for the most part. So it could sort of be like consolidating itself into a little bit of a zone here, and could be finally, almost a year in, establishing itself a bit of a floor, around this level, maybe about where it is, maybe about here. So these are the zones that I would be looking at for potential areas of kind of like establishing a price floor. Would be something from about here, 37.30, to about 38.14. So pretty close to where it is now. And then the question will be, if it's sort of like, if that's its new kind of trading floor, how much upward momentum can it get, and can it then really kind of push off of there and establish a new higher floor in the near future. But just based on the price activity alone, it does look like it's kind of losing some of that sort of extravagant upward momentum that it had. But I think that that's also understandable. I don't even think that that's like a detraction from the stock. I think it's just it hasn't taken like a real breath in, well, forever, actually. It's just now starting to say, okay, doing something that's looking more like a full retracement on some of these pumps. So 42.75, get that there. Let's put this in yellow so we can kind of see it. So on the broader scheme of things, if we look at where we're pulling back into based on this more longer term, like push up, this big jump up that we saw when it sort of started to establish this steeper upper trend line, pulling back into that 236 zone. So it does have, plenty of room if it wants to pull back to like the 35-ish area. But I would look for it to have a strong bounce there if it does pull back that far, meaning it doesn't establish a floor necessarily at this 37.30. But also, I would say that just because it may pull back to this 35.10 area and then come back up, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be establishing a price floor still around this, $37.50, $38 area. It could just do, one big test of this, 35.10 zone, and then come up and consolidate around here before kind of making some impulsive moves upward or downward, and it still could establish along this area. But that said, the 35.10 is interesting because of all of this previous support and resistance that we see here popping off from that zone. So it does align pretty well. On the down side, Where I would be like potentially a really solid buyer in this one is if it did come down all the way to the 30-40 level with that 618 retracement level, because look at all the strength and all the supply and demand pressure that we see there. So there could be a really good zone there. To me, that would be sort of like the ultimate kind of like buy the dip opportunity on ASO. Unless there's some like crazy news catalyst that comes along that sort of like really rocks the stock from its core. But charting wise, that's what I would look at. And checking on the indicators to see sort of like how this momentum might be dying down. We see the RSI basically as low as it's ever been. I guess here we were slightly lower at 43 versus 45 now. But yeah, so basically it's the second lowest as it's been in its history. We might as well pull this out to the 1 year again just to make it easy on ourselves. So as you see here, we're basically as low as we've ever been on the RSI. So that again indicating that like a bunch of the momentum has died down. You see here on the RSI, a bunch of lower highs are basically what we're seeing on this staircase downward. And then the MACD, very extended, well over the baseline for quite some time. I mean, since the end of March, so spending several months over the baseline and now getting its most momentous bearish histogram area coming in. So the most bearish momentum coming in most recently. And you do see the bullish momentum that we saw here in April that died down and then tried to pick up a couple of times, but hasn't been able to rival the bullish momentum that we saw in that time frame. And so that's sort of whittling down as well while the bearish momentum is picking up. So it is looking like it's going to pull back, at least into that sort of purple zone, but I would keep a really strong eye on that 35. And again, if things get kind of hairy, I would be a strong proponent at that 30-40 level as it currently stands. Just a quick check on the MAs since we're there. Curling in a little bit, we don't have a 200 MA, probably because it hasn't been on for 200 trading days. So, but the 20 curling down toward the 50 at the moment, and we'll see if it sort of threatens and to cross over there. If it actually does cross over, we do have a historical precedent for that here, where you see it came in relatively close. It was sort of threatening to cross over here, but we did see it curl down and then flatten out and start moving in parallel and then bounce off, and that was when you got that actually really big push. So something to keep an eye on if history is going to repeat itself there. If this starts to curl down and they become pretty tight with each other, maybe close to this 3801 level, and then start moving in parallel, that might be an indication that just based on previous historical precedents with this stock, that maybe it's going to sort of jump off of there and have a pretty solid push up, pretty steep push up into the future. So some kind of mixed signals here, but I think you just kind of need to see what it's doing at these different zones and make smart decisions based on those factors. I'm going to do a quick look at the order flow here. So yeah, a bunch of large outflow pouring out, which is sort of interesting in terms of like large scale orders coming out recently. We sort of like mix that with the insider activity that I had been looking at. So there has been a lot of sell volume coming out from insiders, and that's sort of part of what I think is contributing to this most recent pullback, because you see not every time, about half of the time when there's sells, you see this insider sell here and it actually pushed up afterwards, but you have this insider sell here and it came down, and then you have this insider sell here and it came down, and then sell here actually came up, but then this sell here actually had it come down quite a bit afterward. So if we take a look at these sells from ASO, it is pretty significant. No buys, but the sells coming in. Now, on the other side of things, that of course bears the question, is that just because folks are trying to kind of cash in and sort of recognize some of the reward of their hard work? And I don't begrudge that for anyone who's put in a lot of hard work to get a company to the marketplace and sort of like have an exit of their own. Like, that's a very fair thing to do. but that's sort of like where I wonder with then the outflow that we see. These are presumably from institutions. I don't know for certain at the moment, but whoever's producing these large scale orders coming out, is there something that's happening that's sort of like known behind the scenes that's causing this sort of like selling activity going on? I don't know. If there is, it hasn't sort of bled through to the analysts yet. The analysts still have 17.62% upside with a median price targets of 45.25. I should say a mean target of 45.25 from the 5 ratings in the last 3 months. So, they're signaling pretty solid upside. Insiders may or may not be signaling downside. Again, that could just be folks trying to recognize some of the hard work that they've put in getting the company to its exit into the IPO, and then rewarding themselves, which again I wouldn't begrudge anyone for. The sort of like outlying factor that I would have is what's causing the outflow in such large quantities, versus small quantities of inflows that we saw in trading days prior. But that's what I would look at on the data side of thing. But a bunch of like sort of mixed bags here, to be honest, both on the charting and on the sort of data side of things. But I would just sort of like continue to analyze that. I think this one, sort of being that it's doing this second time in a row of a relatively strong pullback compared to its own previous price activity, I would just sort of keep an eagle eye on it to try to figure out, okay, what's it going to do? Because it's at this moment kind of in unprecedented territory per this particular stock. All right, well, that will do it for this one. I hope that was sort of some helpful ideas or some helpful info to kind of chew on as you do your own due diligence to make your own decisions based on what you think is best for yourself and your own goals and risk to reward that you're willing to take on. All right, well, thanks a bunch for watching. I definitely appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.